Okay, hello everybody. So, waiting just to fill everybody in, welcome everybody. So, I appreciate everybody coming to join on for the presentation of player development, developing physical and mental endurance. As you know, I've been promoting this presentation via social media that obviously we're going to have the presence of Emilio Sanchez. I'm still waiting to hear from Emilio. He was wrapped up in something, so I'm very much hoping in the next couple of minutes he will be joining on. And if for any reason I find out in the next couple of minutes that he's gotten caught up, my apologies will go out, and I have a great plan for everybody today. So, look, what I wanted to do is start off. Wait one second. I apologize. Hold on a second. I'm seeing. Wait a second. All right. Hold on. Here we go. Screen, gallery view. All right. So I've got everybody tuning in. I appreciate that. So, as I mentioned quickly, I'm hoping that Emilio will be joining us, but he was caught up in something the last 4 days, and I've been messaging him, and he's tied up. So I'm hoping he's going to join us. And in any case, if for any reason I find out he's not able to join us, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be opening this up for a little Q&A after I talk a little bit about the topics of choice, which are very interesting to me as a coach of 29 years. One second, everybody is coming in. And again, I didn't even reference my name. Sorry about that. So first name is Sandy, last name is Middleman. I know I've seen a few of you at the last couple presentations, so I appreciate that. And what I wanted to do was start off by talking about player development and focusing on the long-term gain and process. I've been a big believer in the coaching world in focusing on the future and the long term versus the short term gain and results with kids or anybody you're working with. So with that being said, I feel like one of the things that I think is invaluable to focus on, regardless of the age of the kids, is especially when they get to about 10 years old, maybe 11, 12, is to focus on their physical and mental endurance. And I think there's a lot of ways of developing both of those. It's a pretty busy, that's good. Some good attendance today. So just out of curiosity, it looks like a lot of people from many places and getting some people from a good distance, which is fantastic. I hope everybody is not asleep in the middle of the night. I see Ron's walking, so he's, I think, in Australia. A few people, I'm not sure where everybody is residing, but I know everybody's, some people are waking up in the middle of the night for this, so I appreciate it. So as I was mentioning, when you talk about player development, developing physical and mental endurance, wait one second. Okay. Oh, live from India. Fantastic. India is definitely far away. I'm in West Palm Beach and the weather's terrible. Go figure. So one of the things I think that's important to focus on, and actually part of the reason why I wanted to bring Emilio on, and I'm still hoping he's going to be able to get on, and I apologize that he's caught up in something, but no, wait one second. Okay. Is that, you know, the Spanish method has been long since known as long as I've been in professional tennis world. It's been long since known for mental and physical endurance. The Spanish players, the method, building endurance, physical, mental, working on many aspects, whether it's on the court, in the gym, that help develop those two areas, because we all know that those two areas are foundations for, Martin, hello. They're foundations for future success in matches. And here's a few of the reasons why I believe they're invaluable. So one of the things is that if you've got physical endurance and you've got mental endurance, you're much more tough in long matches. And I think everybody knows that. So you can put aside everything else in terms of technique and skill in hitting the ball. And if you've got those two things in place, then you're going to be largely, you're going to be what I call sort of a leg up or have the edge. when it comes to long matches. So I think that that's obviously invaluable. And then, you know, as we all know, if you're playing outdoors in particular, you never have control over conditions. And that's one of the things that I was interested in talking about, is that I always feel like one of the things that goes undiscussed in coaching kids and juniors is that if you're indoors, that's one thing, but when you get outside and you're playing competitive tennis, nobody has control over the environment or the conditions, and they change all the time depending upon where you're located. So I always feel like the better the conditions you have in terms of mental and physical endurance, the more likely you are to be successful in those particular conditions. Tougher in long matches, tougher in adverse conditions, and tougher in conditional change. And again, relative to the climate you guys are all in, wherever you are in the world, then you could have dramatic conditional changes, or you can have minimal, but you still have conditional changes. I also think it's got a lot to do with when you're in juniors, you're dealing with kids that may play twice a day or more. I know that, I don't know if you want to raise your hand if I see your video out there, who's dealing with kids that play more than one time a day, you know, morning and afternoon. I know that happens a lot. So I think that developing physical and mental endurance are invaluable to helping create success. Now, one of the things I feel like doesn't get stressed enough, and I think is pretty interesting when you talk about physical and mental endurance, is that when your players play a long match and you have to come back later in the day or the next day in the morning, it's not easy to follow up a long, tough match and do it again the next day. And oftentimes the difference is actually their physical and their mental. It's not their ability to hit a shot. So I feel like when you're working with kids, doing things that challenge them both physically and mentally in sort of incremental ways, I feel like is also invaluable to helping them in their competitive world. Those are a couple of the points that I thought were interesting and also important when you talk about developing mental and physical endurance. Now, the other thing is I know in my experiences working with kids through the years, one of the things that you don't really focus on very much when you're in preparation mode, Mark Wertzman, good to see him. One of the things you don't really focus on much in preparation for matches is trying to get from the first point of the tournament to the last point of the tournament. We all as coaches know how difficult that is for any player at any level, boy or girl. It's very challenging. So for me, I feel like it requires a lot of mental and physical endurance just to manage the stress of competition, just being there and dealing with everything going on. So for me, when I'm with any of the players that I've worked with or I currently work with, that's one of the points of emphasis I like to put on is when you're preparing for tournaments, you're preparing to try to get from the first point to the last. You're not just trying to get through one match. And so I feel like doing things in your practices, your training that allow you the opportunity to put your player, boy or girl, regardless of the age, in the best position possible to manage that stress is in their best interest. Because as you know, as coaches, whether you're coaching competitive, you're coaching social players, you're coaching high performance players, you're coaching high school players, all levels, it's all the same idea. There's a high level of stress involved. And so for me, when you're dealing with a player in preparation for competition, you have to consider the stress level, because if you have better mental and physical endurance, then they're better able to manage the stress level. I feel like those are some very important points to make. One of the other points I wanted to emphasize is when you have endurance in the physical and the mental, that also allows your player to have more clarity of thought. So when your players are maybe having a tough match or maybe not feeling great, because it happens, then the more physical and mental endurance they possess, because you've helped them build that up, whether it's you or the trainer or the team, you're oftentimes putting them in a better position that they have clear thought. So regardless of their feeling, they're a little bit more clear on what they're trying to do and how they want to go about doing it, even if their execution isn't fantastic, which can happen. So I feel like it allows for clarity of thought. Um, I'm not sure if there's somebody out there that doesn't have their mute on because it's awfully loud. I apologize. 1 second. Let me just make sure it's not on my end, which it could be. So my apologies again. But one of the things that I also like to emphasize is that um, the more physically fit, more physical endurance that your students have, the more mental endurance your students have, they're more likely to have tactical clarity and be able to better execute the tactics that you've obviously given them prior to match. So, if they're in a tough match and they're deep in the third set, which can happen whether it's a third set full or it's a third set tiebreaker, they're far more likely to have tactical clarity and be able to execute because that endurance is built up mentally and it's built up physically. If they're lacking in any, there is, 1 second, because I'm hearing a pretty loud noise in the background, so my apologies for everybody. Okay. So to summarize a lot of the points I've been referencing in terms of developing physical and mental endurance and the reasons for it, I think it goes without saying that we can all agree as coaches, wherever you are, whatever level players you work with, that every player that you have is going to at some point be challenged mentally and physically. Doesn't matter the level, doesn't matter the age. So when you work with them, whether it's in practice or match play practice, or it's even at tournaments in competition mode, then I feel like putting an emphasis on developing those tools in an elevated way allows you to give your students the best opportunity that when the time comes and they're at, a set all and 4-all, that they feel good about it. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have the upper hand, they're going to win, but they feel good about their opportunity because they're not dragging in their mind. They're very clear, they're very decisive. You told them the tactics to use, and they're in a position where they feel like they can execute. Now, again, whether they execute or they don't, that's not exactly the point, in my opinion. My opinion is that, based upon the years of experience I've worked at all levels, I feel like as long as you've put them in that position, they feel good about it, and then they're in the best position to execute. So those are some points I think that that make sense. Now, one of the things in terms of the mental and the physical endurance, one of the things that I like to do with the players that I work with, whether it's on the court or whether I advise them or consult for them, is I like to find out what their practice habits are, whether it's with a coach or just in general, what they like to do, what their schedule is, and whatever their schedule is, shake it up a little bit. So just to give you an example, I referenced this in another presentation before, get them out of their comfort zone. So if they're used to doing, let's say they're used to practicing 5 days a week, I start adding in a 6th day on this, whatever day a week that is, Saturday or Sunday, because usually Sunday is typically a day off. And what I'll do is I'll ask them right away, look, let's practice Sunday. And they'll ask me what time, and I'll say, let's practice at 6 a.m. And I can tell you that 9 out of 10 times, or probably even 10 out of 10 times, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. I've seen every look you can imagine. I'm sure you guys have seen looks like that before. But when I ask that question, or I deliver that message of let's practice Sunday morning at 6 a.m. Now, obviously, it may be easier in Florida when the weather's better, or a warmer climate wherever you are. But the truth is there's not many kids in the world that are going to want to practice Sunday morning at 6 a.m. Right? I mean, I don't know many. Okay. There may be a few that might, engage in a challenge because it's a huge challenge, but you'll learn a lot about your students when you provide a challenge like that. I'm a big believer in it. It's worked many times with all levels of players. I've done it with 10-year-olds. I've done it with tour players. Obviously there's different levels of challenge involved, right? So maybe 6 a.m. is a bit dramatic for the potential age and the kid you're working with, but I believe that if you use your best judgment because you're the one coaching them, then, and knowing the kid and knowing the family, then what you do is you create an opportunity for them to not only be challenged, but immediately grow. Because if they can do it once, then you can start challenging them in bigger ways. And believe me, that kind of a challenge is not just a mental one, but it's also a physical one, because them getting up out of bed at that hour of the day, that's not easy. Okay. So now, I want to put an emphasis on the physical side for a moment, okay? Because obviously all kids at different ages require different levels of challenge in the physical department. So one of the things that I like to do is try to understand what the physical makeup of the particular child is, right? Boy or girl, age, how they're built. Some are built a little bit more physically developed than others. So you yourself have to make a judgment as to how you feel like they're already physically developed and what also are their tolerances, okay? I've been with players many times where I constantly feel like I have to up the level of the challenge with the trainer, because whatever you do, they're always like pushing you to want to, make them do more, get them to do more. And then there's other times where that the younger child, you have to go in moderation. But I feel like that the more you challenge them, the more they're going to rise up. I feel like oftentimes kids aren't challenged a lot, or challenged enough, not a lot, but enough. Mostly because as a coaches, when we've all been in this position, I've been in it too, you get concerned that you're going to push them too much. But the more physically you can help them develop their endurance, the more mentally they're going to get stronger, and the more they're going to gain confidence. So I feel like all these things, obviously work together. And as coaches, we have to use our judgment, whether you're doing the physical conditioning, whether you're working with a trainer, whatever it might be. I feel like using your own judgment to understand how they think, how they work physically, what their tolerances is, and then be willing to challenge them in increments. You don't have to accelerate it too much, but just enough to, because you're going to build their confidence, because they're going to realize that you believe they can do more than they are doing. And once they realize that you believe they can do more, they will likely start doing more themselves. I feel like all these are factors in, the growth and development of their overall game. And I feel like when they develop the mental endurance, where they can deal with challenges and they can deal with stress, and they can manage whatever circumstance they're in, I feel like they're immediately going to gain confidence. And the same with the physical side. And then all of a sudden, all the things you do with them on the court, or in whatever capacity you work with them, I feel like that'll start to show itself more. So when you're trying to get them, like, for example, to use an example, let's say a kid is struggling to the backhand wide. Everybody's picking on their backhand corner because they have a tough time getting out there. They lose confidence. They lose positioning in the court. So once you build up those two things, then suddenly whatever work you're working on in the backhand side in the corner, it'll start to happen. So I feel like all these are important points of emphasis. And I know that one of the things I often feel like maybe shortchanges the kids a little bit when you work with them, or when we work with them, is that, when I work with kids, my goal when they compete is never to win a round. My goal when they compete is very simple relative to the tournament, whether it's a weekend or a week long, what level it's at. The goal is always simple for me. Put them in the best position possible in their mind, their body, and also obviously with the technical side and the tactical side, to go out and give their best effort in the competition and perform their best and feel their best. And if you can do that, or we can do that, then I feel like many good things will happen. But I often hear, and all you coaches out there, you often probably hear it as well from all your students, and also fellow coaches that you talk to, the idea of, let's try to get through the first round. And like, I've never understood that idea. It doesn't make sense to me, because you got to have your players, and again, high school, developmental level, high performance level, professional level, whatever levels that you're working with, all the above, you've got to have them in the mental and physical position where they believe and they're ready to achieve. So if it's a high school match, they're ready to go the distance in the season, however long your season is. If they're playing high performance tournaments or developmental level tournaments, that if they start on Friday, then they're in a position where they're ready to go and be strong when Sunday comes, if they get that far. I think that's, for me, the major point of emphasis. That's at least how I work with the students I get the opportunity and the privilege to work with, and the players, and that's the point of emphasis I usually reference, is putting them in the best position to be in there for the duration. So again, when you talk about building physical endurance and mental endurance, just like coaches require a lot of mental endurance and physical endurance, depending upon your position and what you do on the court. But we also require both of those. And those things are obviously challenging when you're older. So we can all imagine how challenging they are for the kids when they're younger. And so I really feel like working on those and emphasizing those, I feel like will help develop all the technical and tactical components you're working on developing, whether it's you alone, you with your trainer, you with the coach or a team of coaches. I feel like those will be invaluable assets to your students' growth. What I'd like to do, and again, I'm going to apologize, because obviously it's without question that everybody realizes that Emilio hasn't been able to make it. So I want to apologize, because I know I've been promoting and emphasizing that Emilio's coming. So I'm sure, I don't want to make humor out of it, but I'm sure everybody was coming on maybe more to get a chance to listen to him than me. I won't take offense to it, or, it's okay. I know he's who he is, and I get it. He's a great guy, and he's a fantastic coach, and we've known each other 5 years. But I do know, when I talked to him, he said, yeah, we're good for next Thursday at 5 o'clock. But I have this sort of this thing he was dealing with, he was involved with so he obviously had trouble making it. So I at least wanted to apologize again on his behalf, or I'm sorry, but I'm doing the best to make the time that you guys all took the time to register for, and at least provide you with the information that I was going to share with him, because I actually do feel like it's very important and very interesting. So I would have shared it with you one way or the other way. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to open it up for some Q&A. Okay. So if instead of me talking for 40 minutes, because I could probably talk all night, I don't know where everybody is, but I don't want to do that. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have everybody feel free to share some questions. If there's anything that you want to have answered, because I have a bunch of more bullet points typed out to cover. But what I'd like to do is open it up for Q&A. So if anybody has anything interesting that they feel like I haven't covered, I've covered that's interesting, please share it with me, and I'm happy to share some insight with you. So I've got a question out there. I'm going to do something a little different. Okay, I've got a question. So I'm looking up in the left corner of my screen, and I've got Golfer's World. I don't have a name, but I've got Golfer's World. So she's smiling now. That's great. I got a little smile out of somebody. So what is Golfer's World's name, if I may? Is that okay, or no? Okay.
Sure. My name is Jules.
Sorry?
Jules. We were talking on the phone a couple days ago.
Ah, okay, got it, Jules. All right, very good. Nice to meet you. There you go. All right. I've got something from Henry. Fantastic. I've emailed with Henry a few times. Okay. Henry, for 12 and under players, do you prefer more distance aerobic runs or more 100 to 400 meter with short? Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, I always emphasize something before I answer a question. It's a little bit about knowing the students you're with, to be fair, okay? Because I don't know the students you're talking about or you work with, or whether it's your kids, but I'm a big believer in knowing who the kids are before I recommend something. So for example, I do a lot of player assessments for kids around the world and their parents, okay? And to be honest, I get asked all the time, oh, what about this? Should we do this? Should I do this with my son or daughter? I've never seen them hit a ball. I don't know what they look like. I don't know how they're built. I don't know anything. The only thing I do know is I know they're 12 and under. I know they play some tournaments, right? Okay. I know I'm told they're somewhat competitive, right? So if I had more information, but look, when it comes to 12 and under, let's say that the kids they compete, but they're not super serious, right? They compete, but they're not super serious. Whatever you do, emphasize fun, because I believe that fun, right? Whatever the endurance is or however you do it, fun supersedes everything. Because if they're not super serious and like highly competitive, but they're competitive, then I feel like if you push too much or make it a little bit what we call too intense, maybe what I call too high level of expertise, then you're more likely to lose their interest and their, sort of personal initiative to do it than anything. So I hope that's a somewhat good answer, but I always believe in fun first, because especially in the fitness department, we all know how kids react to fitness, right? It's not always the ideal thing. So that's a good question, Henry. Is there anybody else out there? Let's see. I think I've got, I know a few of you. I know the people that I'm communicating with fairly frequently. There's a few others that I'm not sure I've communicated with. Anybody else with some good questions? Come on. You guys have all got to have a lot of questions, because I know you do, because whenever we get off of these things and I finish them, guess what happens? I start getting emails. I start getting text messages, right? Okay, all day and all night. Can anybody say that I don't respond quickly? Usually I respond pretty quickly, right? Okay. Oh, I got one. Okay. Jules, right? Yep. All right. I'm getting it down. I'm figuring out thumbs up. I get a thumbs up on a Thursday, rainy day in Florida. Fantastic. How would you say nutrition plays into the mental endurance aspect? Quite large. It's a good question. It's an interesting topic. I'm by no means a nutritional expert. Obviously, it's not my background, but I dealt with a lot of nutritionists. I think we could all probably guess, whoever we work with, what would be things you wouldn't want your student athletes to eat, right? And what would be things that you would consider, more suitable, right? Okay. So again, this is a little bit goes to somewhat to Henry's point about the younger kids, right? Okay. Or kids in general. I think without knowing the kid, age, what their physical makeup is, what they do, what the parents feed them, right? All those things. I think those things are important to know versus just throwing out ideas. But look, in general, I don't think anybody here, any of us coaches can do what? I don't think we can go wrong with them eating more healthy, right? That's always the best option. It's never a bad thing. Okay, a couple more questions coming in. Good. 1 second. Sorry. What age? So this is from Live in Tennis. Okay. Sandy, what age we must tell a player to net play? Some of my players' kids are scared to go to the I love that question. That's a great question. I'm a big believer in the earlier the better. It's one of the things I mentioned in I think the first couple presentations. I believe that the sooner they start getting a feel for the net, the service line forward, the volley, being up there, having a comfort level with the grips and the technique and the movement and the anticipation, I think the better off you're going to be. I think they're going to become a better player overall. So the sooner that you start doing that, and one of the things that is always interesting to me is when kids are quite young, I feel like when you use the softer balls, even like if they're young and they're using the regular balls, I feel like they actually somehow enjoy the net more. Like they actually have fun up there trying to do it. So I feel like the earlier you do it, the better. Okay. Well, so this, I'm getting the old time clock that I've got 9 minutes and 57 seconds left. So I'm just letting you know ahead of time. Okay. Oh, a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to try to get through them. Can you please talk a little bit about recovery, sleep, stretching, ice baths from, wait 1 second, from Nicola. Absolutely, Nicola. Pleasure to see you. Pleasure to meet you. My Serbian and Croatian is not good enough to speak to you like that on camera. Definitely not. Okay. Malo priča. Okay. Nije but I go with English. Okay. So yeah, in terms of recovery, I think that, you know, again, depending upon age and how hard they work and all those things, I think absolutely. 1 second, I apologize, don't mean to interrupt. I'm just getting somebody that's coming in. They're coming back and forth, trying to do the best I can. I feel like emphasizing sleep is invaluable. I feel like ice bath is a 50-50, okay, toss up, because some people like that stuff. Some people are open to things, right? And some people are super against it. But I feel like I like how you put Netflix in there. Okay, that's actually kind of funny. That gives me a good laugh, and I needed one today. So look, sleep, stretching, ice baths, great. Sleep and stretching, primary. Get sleep. Always get sleep because it's good for growth, right? Everybody knows that when they're younger. The longer they sleep, the better. I feel like ice baths and stretching, absolutely. Because let's put it this way: who here can raise their hand if they think their kids stretch enough? I doubt it, right? Because I know that the players I work with, it's always a constant battle, right? We're always trying to work to get them to stretch more, stretch properly, right? The trainers try to do it, but I feel like it's always a little bit of a battle. So I hope that answers your question, but I definitely think emphasizing those things is very important. Live-in tennis. I hear from UTR that 50% points are from net play. That's a stat I haven't heard before, and that's an interesting stat. But look, I feel like net play, I feel like developing the kids at the net, I feel like is invaluable. I always wonder when I watch kids, for example, play doubles, and all 4 kids are at the baseline. I'm wondering what's happening. Why are they all at the baseline, like 3 feet behind the baseline rallying, right? So for me, it can only be one of a couple reasons. A, because they've never really learned to play the net, or B, they learn to play the net, but they're not actually made to do it. So I feel like developing the net skills, making them do it in a match play situation can always help them in the singles. And I feel like that all is a overall complete player. I feel like it's invaluable. Truth be told, if you watch the game right now, all the top players, they're all fairly comfortable to extremely comfortable finishing at the net. It doesn't mean they do it all the time, but it means that they're prepared to do it. Okay, so I feel like it's invaluable to teach it and coach it. Small court. This is from Jules again, I believe, right? I'm getting this right. I'm trying to get in the flow here. Just when we're going to finish, I'm going to get in the rhythm. Okay, like a practice, right? Just when they finish, they're finishing and getting rid of the rhythm. Small court tennis is super important to get kids to be more comfortable with the net. Absolutely, no question about it. Find the solutions to getting them into net, because I feel like this is one of the things I think I talked about with Gigi Fernandez. I talked about it with Johan. I talked about it with Sylvain Bruneau on the first one, and I'm going to be consistently talking about it because it's something I very much believe in. Look, one of the things that you see in programs everywhere is you see players start at the service line, right? They start with a mini tennis, and what's the first thing they do after? They're told to back up to the baseline. And I don't understand why. You have so much more of the court to develop. So you have further towards the net, right? The volleys, the feel, the touch, the technique, the footwork, the reading of the ball, right? The anticipation. And then obviously you have the mid-court, the transition area. It used to be called no man's land or no person's land. Okay, not to be male, female. Okay, but it used to be called that, right? When I was growing up, and probably all of you guys as well, most of you guys. It's transition land. That's where you want the players to be in that position so they can move forward and attack, right? So I feel like the small courts definitely allow for that to happen, and the more that they work from there, the better. Absolutely. Alejandro Medina, for small kids 10 and under, is it recommended to start some type mental toughness training, or is it too early and could push them away from it? That's a really good question. I believe if you can work on the mental game with the 10 and under, but do it in a way where it doesn't seem like work. right? I mean, that's like a, that's a thing that you have to understand about your kids, right? The students that you have, the families that you have. If you can do it in a fun and constructive way, I feel like it's invaluable, right? And you can even do it in ways where it's competitive, right? Where they're on the court, but they're working on the mental game, but they don't actually realize that they're doing it, right? But if you're sitting like 10 and unders in a classroom, okay, or some type of like sort of formal setting, I think maybe it gets, you may lose them, right? But if you can make it something fun, interactive on the court where they're working on it and they don't realize they are, then I think that that's helpful. I hope that answers your question, and that's an interesting answer. From Oliver Good. Hello, Oliver. Nice to meet you. I think we've communicated as well. What percentage of time in a lesson do you spend feeding balls, doing drills, match play? Ooh, good questions, you guys. So it's very much relative to two things. One is, who is the kid, right? Who is the boy or the girl? Okay. What age? What are their skill set? Okay. How am I working with them? Because I don't work with any players right now full time on the court. I work with everybody from a distance. Everybody I'm like an advisor and a consultant to. So I do a lot of video analysis. But if I'm working with somebody on the court consistently, if that's the case, which it isn't right now, then what I do is, once I know what I believe the boy or the girl's needs are, age, needs, skill set, what they're good at, what maybe areas they could use a little work on, then I decide how I feel like the practice or the lesson should be set up. But I will tell you two things. I believe in more work on net play, more work on serve and return, because I don't think those two shots are emphasized nearly enough. I think usually serve is the last thing you do in a practice, and I don't know why that is. I feel like it needs to be intermixed or spent more time on. But I'm also, in terms of percentage, if I had to give one to be more clear with the answer versus wordy, so I apologize to Oliver and everybody else, I'm not a huge believer in ball feeding. I'm a believer in more like tossing, sometimes ball feeding, but a little bit, again, it depends on the player and what I feel like their needs are. And also, too, I feel like you have to use a judgment with the percentage of time, because I also believe it's got something to do with how much time you actually see your students, right? Sometimes you see them 1 hour a week. So you have to decide the best, the best rhythm. Look, we're less than a minute away from finishing. I've just been given the hazard sign. So I want to thank everybody for coming on. I want to apologize the last time for the lack of Emilio. I know you all came on to see him, but I do appreciate everybody. I hope this was constructive. I hope you enjoyed the session. I'd love to get your feedback on it and anything I could do better, anything you'd want to hear more of. And thank you very much. And I'm going to be announcing my next presentation that's after Sundays, probably by tomorrow morning. So please look for it on social media and feel free to be in touch. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day. Have a great night. And I'll see everybody soon. Take care.